Welcome everyone, I'm Becky Carr. Today's webinar, we're going to be looking at the new FinxS Sales 18 assessment. So I'm going to talk about that in a moment. I just want to give you a little bit of background about why I chose it. As you all know, there have been two other new assessments released last year, and they were the Sales Competency Development Assessment and the Sales Competency Recruitment Assessment. Both of those are not modelled on DISC theory and instead use competencies, which looks into things like attitudes, mindsets and behaviours. So those sorts of things are measured against 18 critical sales competencies. Both those assessments look and measure the salesperson's current sales levels. So last month, the webinar we chose to do and look at in a bit more depth was actually looking at the Sales Competency Recruitment Assessment. So in keeping with a similar theme, I wanted to have a look at the FinxS Sales 18 because it really offers some pretty insightful information, especially for sales coaches, consultants and managers. You know, the reason I really wanted to talk about it was it's basically, this is the link or the connection between bringing that sales competency, the development report, back into the DISC. So I'm going to explain that a lot more as we go. So let's start with a quick overview because I think that's the easiest way to keep a good tight agenda. First of all, these assessments are based on the DISC model and theory. So that means it uses the same 24 questions as the other DISC assessments. So yes, you can reorder this assessment like you can with any of the other behavioural assessments. So I call them BA reports. As the data sits in your account. So just to clarify, if your client has already completed a DISC assessment, any of the other ones, in something like leadership or the standard report, for example, you can then reorder this FinxS Sales 18 assessment and it doesn't take any more points. It's free. If the client hasn't done a DISC report of any sort before, then the system will charge you the normal 10 points, which is what it charges for any DISC report. So the difference is this little gem of a report, it's got a little bit of a different layout from what you might be used to. And we will be looking at that a little bit later. So in other DISC assessments, you or the client would really need to know the DISC theory or model to understand the steps of how or what DISC teaches you. So those would include things like, you know, a good knowledge of the DISC styles, awareness of your own style, awareness of others' styles, and then learning how to adapt or adjust your style to others. Whereas this FinxS Sales 18 is actually highly tuned, or it's really intuitive. So the client or team member does not need to know DISC theory at all. Yet they still get an easy to use and valuable information from the actual assessment itself. It delivers information about the person's hardwired and natural comfort levels against 18 critically important sales competencies, hence the name FinxS Sales 18. So lastly, the information in the report helps to define clear development plan for the coach, manager, or the person themselves to identify with. They can identify, define, and implement a development plan. So just to reiterate, it's not DISC-based. It uses the same 24 questions. It's based on their DISC style, so it's their hardwired behaviour. It can be used as a standalone report, one of the normal DISC reports, or it can be used in conjunction with the sales competency, which I'm going to show you a little bit later. So you can use this report, or your client can look at this report without any prior knowledge of DISC. And the report itself helps to implement a very clear development plan as well. So let's have a look at what the actual 18 competencies are that I'm talking about here. So you'll see on my slide, I've got them up on the board. These are the 18 competencies that are critical to sales success, and each is clearly defined in the report. There's no need to guess at what they mean, and no bias comes into play when drilling down into the details of each one. So without reading them all, you can see measurements, for example, on things like prospecting, goal orientation, needing approval, dealing with failure, emotional detachment, etc., etc. Really valuable sales competencies. Here's the thing. The salesperson does not need to focus on all 18 competencies, as they are not equally important to everyone or every sales role at the same time. So for example, just yesterday, I was working with a client and we first took the time and we sat through and looked at all 18 competencies together. We read over what they meant and we highlighted which are the ones we felt was really critical to that person's role and their selling of the specific products or services. So for example, prospecting wasn't high on the list of the example I'm talking about, yet this was a seasoned seller and they had naturally built up their client base for inbound opportunities and referrals. So in addition, they were also being given warm leads. So a high rating in prospecting actually wasn't critical. However, what we did discover was rapport building and qualifying was actually important to this particular role. So the results for those competencies, we then spent some time drilling down into further and dissecting a little more. Again, the report gives a very clear definition of what each of these competencies means, and we'll have a look at those. So that means that there's absolutely no misunderstanding. Just a tip before we get any further, my tip is, as you work with these Sales 18 competencies, keep rereading the definition, as it's really easy to start using your own definition. And that's not always accurate in how the report measures that person. You know, bias plays a big part in this as well. Okay, so let's look inside the report itself. So each of the 18 competencies is given one full page. First, the headings at the top, as you can see. Then there is a definition of the competency. And it's this definition I urge you to keep looking over and analysing, as you're analysing, to make sure you don't get off track or start to use your own definitions. So after the definition, there are approximately 15 behavioural dimensions that make up that competency. The competency is then explored further to generate a very clear identification of the unique sales strengths and development areas of that person based on their own unique DISC style. So in the example, you can see on screen that we can see qualifying up the top there, the systematic process of carefully verifying whether or not a prospect is willing and able to buy. As you can see, the behavioural dimensions listed each show an expectation score of 5. And we can see that, that's highlighted in the green on this particular report. However, no one will ever score a 5 on every competence. Rather, the expectation scores are the ideal or target scores that are compared against the person's natural behavioural style. Now that's the clear box with the black border. So those are the DISC, the hardwired DISC information that is the link, I guess, as I can say, between what their actual DISC style is. This sample salesperson has a 40% match, as you can see down the bottom there. That means that this person really might feel only moderately comfortable or natural with this particular competency, but it's still, it's still on the lower side, sitting at 40%. It's not really low, but it's not the mid to high range either, where I would potentially prefer this, especially as yesterday I discovered the competency is pretty critical to this person's role. So I could see that this immediately would be a development area, and that was before I even then overlaid or applied what we call the Sales Competency Development Report. So I could see this was going to be a development area. We can overlay the competency report to get even more out of it, which I'll show you soon. So just another wee tip, gosh, I'm full of them today. Typically a sales competence strength is defined as having a match percentage score higher than 66%. Low percentage match scores, below say 33%, mean the sales competence will take more energy and adjustment from the salesperson. So for me, I would have preferred her to have more of the behavioural dimensions on the right-hand side, sitting on say 4 or 5. This salesperson, because of their hardwired behavioural style, is not that comfortable in this area. It doesn't mean that they can't or won't be successful in it. They just might need more support, more training in this particular area. So for me as a coach, I can really hone down and develop this area. Okay, before I go on, I just want to reiterate, this would only be a development area if they actually needed this skill in their current position for that particular role. All 18 competencies, again, are not equally important for every salesperson. So as I said, the sample about information about yesterday, we found that prospecting actually wasn't that important. So even if they had got a low score in prospecting, I possibly wouldn't spend my energy and efforts developing that area if it wasn't critical to the person's particular role. So I just wanted to show you a competency with a higher match percentage so we can basically get a comparison. So here's a match percentage of 83% for controlling the sales process. So see the figure again at the bottom of the page. And you can see, of course, on the slide, there's many 4s and 5s. So this competency is defined as actively taking charge of every step of the sales process by clearly defining and agreeing upon all the steps and possible outcomes with the prospect. The purpose is to help guide the prospect toward a decision. So again, this competency was regarded as really important for this salesperson's current position. So the percentage match of 83 clearly showed she would feel naturally comfortable to do this. Yay, tick. Just another tip, there are times that people might have a high match, let's say up in the 90, 95, 99 area. So of course, they feel very comfortable using certain dimensions. Therefore, they focus highly on that area. What we know, of course, is when you're hardwired, that is in that area, that tends to be a strength, and then it's easy to use and it feels motivating. What we do tend to find, and we have to be careful of, is not overusing that particular strength either. So, you know, again, if it feels easy, the rep, the salesperson, is naturally inclined to use it, and that tendency can be a bit of a blind spot. So, in other words, it can irritate or can actually hinder you at the end of the day from using it too much. So those that know DISC would have heard me talk about before overuse and blind spots. Same sort of thing can happen here. So to summarise just where we're at the moment, if a Sales 18 report shows a low match percentage, then the sales competency tends not to feel comfortable. That person may need to use more energy and push themselves outside their comfort zone to make an adjustment to be more effective or more successful in that competence. So in other words, deliberately building rapport or deliberately controlling the sales process might be the competency that needs more awareness, more cognizance, more effort. So a high percentage match typically means that competence is a clear strength. Their natural behaviour tends to match that area of selling. There is not too much modification needed to make that area of selling a success or be effective in it for them. So also, we have an overall match, percentage match, as you can see, but the sales report allows you to deep dive. So you can focus on some of the specific behavioural dimensions that show as a lower score. So this type of detail lets you drill down and focus on what might be needed to coach. And you can see I've got it on the screen there. You've actually got a match percentage after each competency. So for me, when I start to look at these, I can start to see, okay, if they've got a mid-range overall match, what are the particular dimensions that they are struggling with? And can I look at those and look at developing those? So here's a comment that I get quite often. Becky, what about the clients that may not agree with some of the results? Yep, good point. You know, typically clients will generally agree with most of the results. However, they may have some reluctance to accept certain development areas, blind spots. These are very normal reactions. It is always more difficult to explore things like weaknesses that might impede one's present level of success, especially if they are blind spots. So, you know, we just so don't know sometimes what our blind spots are, and it takes others to point them out. So also keep in mind that the purpose of this assessment is to provide guidance as to how the person can become even more successful. Remember, the scores do not measure any behavioural modification the person is already making. It simply identifies the person's natural, unmodified DISC style. That's really important. It's not like the competency reports where it captures the current capability, attitudes, mindsets of the person, okay? And that can alter. This is coming back to the DISC methodology where it captures the hardwired behaviors, unmodified DISC behaviors. So if you are putting, a lot of development into an area, until you actually overlap it with the competence report, it will still reset back to its core, to your core hardwired behaviors. So your clients do not need to know the DISC theory in order to understand their results, yet they still receive and can understand a very intuitive, very much focused on sales assessment. It's a great report to help. It's a really great report to make you. It's a great report to help make your role and decisions simpler because you don't have to train them to understand the DISC style results. And I find that really helpful at times too. You don't have to go back, teach them, half an hour of DISC information for you to go forward. So you and your client can immediately move forward and focus on development areas, action plans, etc. towards success. However, if you are familiar with DISC model and the theory, you'll get even more out of the following pages. Okay, this page or section is optional. So if you want to include it, but your client is, and your client is obviously familiar with DISC or comfortable with DISC, then you can keep it in. But of course, you can also opt out of this area. So it just gives you that other one page that I showed you. So the all 18 of these competencies are shown like this, and they follow each of the other one pages. It shows basically where the required behaviors are for that competence, where it comes from in relation to that DISC diamond. So the top part of the page shows which kind of behavior would be needed to be effective in each of the competence. So for example, process orientation, required sort of behavior, and the picture shows ideally where on the DISC diamond such a skill might be positioned in the ideal world. And we can see up there that it tends to be sitting on the SC side up there. The bottom of the page shows where this actual person sits naturally, how they are hardwired in that competency, and that is the process orientation. So this example is showing us just how much stretch this person might need to adjust in order to succeed in this area. We can see here visually where the overlap is. We can see here that the person is basically an ID style, almost a direct opposite of the ideal CS style that is ideally fits the role where process orientation tends to sit. So appropriate question would need to be asked. If this was a recruiting situation, you might also see there is a reference to development tips and sales assessment development report, which I'll show you soon. I think in this situation, like just solely development, would I look at developing this person? It really, again, it really comes back to, is this particular competence critical? This is going to be quite a hard development area for this particular person. It's a big reach to stretch them from one side of the axis to the other. So I would have to look at this a bit further and work out, are there other priorities to get them, an easier development area, or is this one absolutely critical and I do need to focus on it? Okay, so now you feel a little bit more familiar with the FinxS Sales 18, but how might we use it? The FinxS Sales 18 is actually specifically intended to be used along with your FinxS Sales Competence development assessment, not the recruitment, the development assessment. And it truly gives added value to analyze and discuss. It's designed to help you better understand and further develop sales success with your client or individual team member. And remember, the Sales Competency Development Report actually only uses 7 points, but it's worth its weight in gold. So when I talk about the sales development, this one's worth 10 points. The Sales Competency Development only uses 7 points. And it's, as I say, it's great to match them up and use them together. And I'll show you how to do that. So let's take a look at actually how I do that now. Remember, I was showing you before the 1 page per competency, what that looked like. Well, it actually does look like the above slide now that I've pulled it down. I have the page of qualifying competencies showing again. Notice it actually has a workbook type area down the bottom to fill in, and I've actually taken a snapshot of that and just made it a bit bigger so we can see it. It asks you to transfer what the client or team member generated as their specific result in their competency development assessment. Okay, so if they've done both, if they've got FinxS 18 and you've done the competency development assessment, that's asked you to bring the result into this page of that competence. Then it asks you to minus the match percentage from the results in the FinxS Sales 18. Sounds tricky, but actually it's not. The result helps you determine if they are using that competency more than expected, like if you get a positive result, or not using that competency to their full potential for some reason. So when it, as you can see on the screen, positive percentage indicates you are performing better than your natural style predicts. Negative percentage indicates that you are not using your full potential, and that's a negative result. So you can only imagine, you know, myself as a consultant, that this is just such important information. For me, it helps me to define which competencies could be more difficult to develop further, you know, as they might be at or maybe even beyond their natural expectation already. And that means using a lot of energy and effort already to get the score that they have. More effort, more energy, more training may not actually produce more results. That's not to say I won't still support and train them in that area and try to lift it up further, especially if I have determined it's a major issue or major area and one that's critical to success in their particular position. But it makes me drill down on the real areas I should be concentrating the coaching in. As we all know, there's always areas that salespeople need to embrace that will be out of their comfort zones. We all have those. So here's my last tip. I certainly go through and highlight the crucial competencies in the sales competency development assessment that relate specifically to the critical areas in the current role. I tend to just use the summary page, and I make sure I read the definitions, similar to what I said to you to do in the FinxS 18 as well. So for example, a BDM role, I would think that prospecting and goal orientation would be pretty important and certainly part of the mix of what I would be looking for higher levels. I then look at the results and analyze if they are over or under expectation for their hardwired disc style, which I get from this report. So from here, I can create a plan forward, an action plan. So I hope that wasn't too confusing with me going through that, but there's two reports, the FinxS 18 and the Sales Competency Report. You can merge them together to give you even more information about whether that person is extended past what their natural disc style might be expecting or limiting themselves in some way. And as a coach, I then can go into different mind blocks or techniques, whatever I've identified as being needed. So whatever you choose or however you choose to coach from here, you know you will have real and vital information as to why things like avoidance, overuse, underperformance, etc. might be prevalent with your client or team member. Knowing the information from both reports, you can drill down and find what the blocks are. Things like blind spots, energy going out, too much energy. And I can work out whether coaching is required to make any development in those areas. Just believe me though, I can tell you, it's not always about capabilities of the person. You know, it's sometimes attitudes and mindsets play a huge part in it as well. So, well, I hope you enjoyed the webinar today. I really wanted to show you how easy it is actually to use the Sales 18 report. It's pretty straightforward. It's a matter of looking at the competencies. It's a matter of, if you have DISC methodology, looking at how those competencies fit in regards to behavioural fit. So it was more important to show you today, you know, how to effectively use it, but bring that competency report back into the DISC area as well to give you brilliant information when coaching or assessing your team. So let's briefly go over what I talked about today. The FinxS Sales 18 is DISC-based, and it measures the hardwired behaviour of the person, okay, of the salesperson. It's based on 18 critically important sales competencies. The FinxS Sales 18 report is free if they have already completed some sort of extended DISC behavioural report before, but it's only 10 points if they have not. It is a standalone report. You can just order it off and look at this report. But I really urge you, it is fantastic when you overlay it with the sales competency development report. And that's where it gives you those highs and lows, or are they overextended or under or limiting themselves. Your client or team member does not have to understand DISC knowledge or methodology to get really valuable information from it. You can opt in or opt out of the DISC required natural pages depending on your background of DISC or how comfortable you feel. Lastly, analysing the page competency and overlaying both reports is really easy and incredibly valuable. You know, it's a really wonderful assessment and I find it so invaluable. It really adds value and insight to sales. So just make sure you have it in your account ready to use, and off you go. Give it a whirl. If you are unsure if you do have it in your account, or you want a bit more information about today or clarification of some sort, you can contact HR Profiling, and anyone there can actually talk to you specifically about it and try and clarify anything that you need. But all I can say is that it's been a really good coaching and consulting tool, and it's something that's still quite new and people are getting used to it. But it's an easy report to use, so give it a go. Hey, well, thank you very much for joining me today, and I'll be joining you next month, and we'll be having a look at the next topic soon. Courtney will pop that out. Thanks, everyone.